a CareerFoundry graduate, but is now working as a product designer at Miro or Miro?
Miro.
Miro. I always get that wrong. But yes, welcome everybody. I know we've got a lot of people who are joining this evening. We've got a chat in Big Mark on the right-hand side. We've also got a YouTube stream going too. And I think we might also be beaming to everybody on LinkedIn as well. So for those on Big Marker, just drop your name, where you're joining from, and why you're interested in the designer's hiring process. So this is the event, this is the topic that we're talking about tonight. Maureen is going to give you some pro tips. So we'd love to know why everybody is here, and we want to make this as engaging as possible. So hi, Maria. Hi, Charity. We've also got an emoji bar on Big Marker, which you can also hit emojis as we're talking through. Let me just introduce CareerFoundry very, very briefly whilst people are joining. So my name is William, Events and Communications Lead here at CareerFoundry, and CareerFoundry is the online career academy for aspiring tech professionals. So we take people from absolute scratch, we train them up, we give them the skills with a mentor and a tutor and a job guarantee, and we land them their dream career in tech. If you've got any specific questions about CareerFoundry's curriculum, maybe jobs in your locality, I would recommend booking a call with a program advisor. I'll post a link for those watching on Big Marker, but in YouTube, you can see it in the description below. And they will answer any questions that you may have about CareerFoundry's curriculum or programs. But this evening is all about a designer's guide to hiring processes, and Maureen's going to have the floor. We're going to do a live Q&A at the end where I'll pick out the most challenging questions for Maureen. And so do drop your questions and we will be asking those at the end. Maureen, lovely to see you. We didn't really get a chance to introduce because this happened so quickly, but it's over to you.
Yes, we had some technical issues, so I managed to join this webinar in the last 30 seconds. So the adrenaline is high. Let's keep the energy high for the coming hour. A little introduction about me. I am, as William already said, a CareerFoundry alumni. I finished the course program in 2018. I am currently working as a product designer at Miro, and you might have known me from some of my social media platforms. I write about design on Substack. I share design advice and my experiences on Instagram and on LinkedIn. So if you don't, please feel free to follow. And otherwise, maybe you've already seen me in other webinars. So today I want to talk a bit about how the hiring process looks like. So imagine you already set your first steps to finding your first job, or maybe you're already in a job and you're looking to promote or go to another company, continue your career journey. What can you expect from these hiring processes? What I'll talk about today is a general approach. What you will find is that many companies have their own hiring processes. So some companies have more steps than others. What I try to do is summarize the hiring processes that I have been through in the past 6 years and kind of like find some common patterns and tell you how to get through each of these steps. So first of all, let's take a look at how the hiring process looks like in general. So usually after you've sent out your application, the first step would be to have a screening call. So this is oftentimes a quite informal phone call that is there to basically figure out if you are who you say you are on your resume, and kind of get to know each other, introduce the role in the company a little bit. And this is also your opportunity to let the hiring manager or the recruiter, whoever is doing this screening call, know who you are and why you would be a good fit for this role. So while these calls are oftentimes quite casual and informal, and they oftentimes take between 15 and 30 minutes, they're really not that long, and you don't really need to prepare anything for these calls, but it's always good to come prepared with a good introduction. So before you have the screening call, think about how would you introduce yourself? What is important for this person to know about you? How would you make a good fit for this role? So that you already feel a bit prepared when you have this phone call. Then, as you progress, so imagine you have had your screening call, people are enthusiastic about what you've told there. Then the next step is oftentimes some kind of interview. And in my experience, this is oftentimes the interview with the people that would be working together with you. So your future manager, colleagues that would work together with you. And this is really your opportunity to learn more about the design culture at the company, the role, of course, explain a bit more about your expertise, your background, and really have an opportunity to ask very design specific questions. Because what you'll find in these screening calls that happen before is that these are oftentimes with people that are not designers, and so they might not be able to answer very design specific questions. Then, what is actually always part of the hiring process, and it is a quite controversial topic that a lot of people have been quite unhappy with for the past years, is two parts. One is showing your portfolio. Now, that is not so controversial, but the second part, the challenge is, so oftentimes you will have some opportunity to show your portfolio around. This is really your way to showcase relevant work. And what you will find here is that this is less about taking the people through the portfolio that you have online on your website or Notion or Contra or wherever you have your portfolio, but rather this is a way to dive deeper into these projects that you show on your public website, and perhaps also show some work in progress, show some Figma files. So what I found, especially in the most recent hiring rounds that I've done, is that within this portfolio round, they're less interested in very slick and well presented pitch decks, but rather I would just take them through my Figma files, all the wireframes, the designs I've made, the user journeys I've made. And this is really the opportunity to dive deep, show people how you work in these design tools, how you arrive at design decisions, and kind of like give them a look behind the scene. Then there is oftentimes some kind of challenge. This can be either a take-home assignment or a whiteboard challenge. We'll talk about that in detail a little further down. And then there might be, this is not always the case, but it has been the case for me in the most recent interviews I've done, some kind of cross-functional interview round. That means that you're talking with colleagues in other functions, so non-design colleagues. You might be having an interview with product analysts, engineers, product managers, anyone that you would be working together with. So also to better understand how they work, how design is a partner to them, and how you could fit into that team. And then if you made it through all of these rounds, and you're lucky, you finally arrive at the offer negotiation stage. And this is, of course, the stage where you can almost feel the relief and the excitement. But here you also have to be careful, because things are not final until you put your sign on the paper. And even then, things can still change. So this is like a general overview of how the hiring process usually looks like. And I will now dive deeper into these different parts and tell you a little bit about my experiences, how I prepared for them, and what I would recommend you do as well. So first of all, this screening call, this is really about getting to know each other. And just because it's casual doesn't mean that you don't need to put any effort in it. In fact, for me personally, this is really the make or break moment, because this is the moment where, even though you won't be talking with the design team yet, you already get a feeling of how the culture at a company is, what they value. You have the opportunity here to already give them a bit of a taster of your skills, your expertise, your interest, and your values. And this is also the moment where you have that first well, face-to-face contact when you're talking over Zoom, or at least you have some human contact, because everything up until this point has been job applications through systems, sending cover letters, sending your portfolio. And this is really the moment for you to shine. So what that means, if you are someone that is very outgoing, is to tap into that more than you would even in a portfolio, because this is really your moment to show that personality. If you are a bit more introverted, this might be a very daunting moment, because this will be the first moment that you're actually talking face to face with someone. And therefore, it's even more important that you feel comfortable, that you feel confident, and thus that you take some time to think about, what can I talk about? Like, what should I tell here? So what should you focus on during this screening call? Ignore this headline. I should have removed that. That's just a placeholder headline. The three things that you should be focusing on are the three C's. So the company, the culture, and the compensation. And I know this is very daunting to immediately talk about money early on. I'll talk about that in a minute. The best thing that you can do, and preferably you have already done this before you start applying, and you have already done this when you're writing your cover letter, but read up on what the company does before you have your interview, before you have your screening call. There is a lot of information out there that can help you understand what kind of company you're applying to. Oftentimes companies have their own press pages. They might even have pages with tips on hiring processes, interviews on YouTube with people that are working there. Check out their LinkedIn page. Just try to gather as much information as you can to really understand, what are the kind of people that work at this company? What kind of industry does this company work in? What are the challenges that they're facing? What are big wins that they had recently and that they wrote a press release about, for example? So really put in your effort to get to know this company. And I like to use this analogy of dating, and that a job interview process is very much like dating. The same way as that you wouldn't enjoy a first date with someone that is obviously not interested in you and is not asking you any questions and does not really bother to get to know you. This is the same way. You want to show this company that you're interested in them, and thus you want to ask them questions. You want to show that you know what they're all about. So really take that moment to do some research on the company. Then this is also a good moment to ask about the culture, to try to understand, what kind of company is this? What kind of people do they attract? What kind of people are working there? So what I oftentimes like to find out during these phone calls is, what are they looking for in people? What would I need to bring to the team in order to help the team move forward? What kind of skills are they looking for? I also like to talk about, like, what kind of team would I be working in? What would be the focus of this role? Who would be people that I would be collaborating with? What are the biggest challenges that this team is facing right now? And then lastly, and this will give you a lot of information about the culture at a company, is, what's the stage of the company at? Is it a startup? Is it an agency? Is it a corporate? Are you joining a company that is just going through a reorganization? Are you joining a company that is that has moved out of very heavy layoff rounds? All of these things impact the culture of a company. Of course, you can imagine, if they've faced very severe layoffs recently, the morale might be a little bit low, and so you can count that into the job interview. Or if it's a startup, they might be looking for more all-round talent. If it's a corporate, they might be looking for more specialized people with very in-depth knowledge about a certain industry or about a certain process. So what kind of company this is, already to a certain extent tells you what kind of culture comes with that. Of course, you will have startups with corporate culture, and you have corporates that are still very have a very high velocity. So it's not the end all of it, but it gives you an indication. And then lastly, and this is very daunting, and I still find this quite a scary question to ask, but try to get clarity on compensation as soon as possible. And what you preferably should do before you jump into this conversation is do some research online. So check other job descriptions on LinkedIn to find salary ranges for comparable job interviews. You have an app called Blind, where you will have a lot of companies where you with employees on this app that you can ask for salaries. Check Glassdoor, ask around in your the designers that you know locally, because salaries also range from city to city. So do your research before, so that you kind of know what is the general like average of the market or the role that you're looking for, and try to get an answer from them before you say what you would hope as a range. But that is not always possible. It's a bit of like a push and pull game of who will give the answer the first. What I found is if companies really don't want to give a range, then I will give them a range. And I oftentimes base that range on the research I've done before, the experience I've had, my previous salaries, and I try to go at least 10, preferably 20% higher than that. I think it's always good to start higher so that you can kind of leave some middle ground. What I found very useful, for example, when I moved to Amsterdam, where I did not know the market at all, I couldn't really rely on the salary ranges that I was used to from Berlin, because Amsterdam is completely different, is really just going through all the job descriptions that I could find on LinkedIn, looking for salary ranges, going to company pages and career pages in these companies, find these salary ranges, and kind of do my own research to understand what I could ask. As a rule of thumb, I found that in general, the salary at agencies is much lower than when you would have an in-house role. So you cannot expect an agency to pay the same amount of money that a corporate would pay, for example. Usually that's not the case. So it also depends on, again, what kind of company you're applying to. So when you've done your screen phone call and you get invited to the next round, the design interview round, then this is really the moment for you to ask all of the questions, because a hiring process is very much a two-way conversation. It's not just about you wanting to impress the company. The company should impress you as well. And so this is really your chance to think about what is important to you and get answers to these questions. So this is the moment to understand the job expectations, the design culture, the maturity in a company, and also learn about who your future colleagues might be and what kind of people they are. So what you want to focus on in this step is you want to get as clear as a picture as possible about how your workday and how, let's say, the vibe at work would look like. So what would you be working on? With who will you be working together? How would your daily work look like? How will alignment between different teams look like? So these are just 4 questions that I always ask, and based on these answers, I might ask follow-up questions. So first of all, I always want to know how the design culture looks like in this company. Of course, the answer will not be 100% a reality, because in the end of the day, it is a hiring process where both parties try to make the best impression possible. So take this with a grain of salt, the answers you get. But this is also for you to just ask follow-up questions if you feel like, I'm not really getting the answer. So the reason why I ask, can you describe the design culture, is because I'm very curious to know how designers work together. Are they all, is there a lot of collaboration between designers? Are you as a designer more of like a sole designer in a product team? Is there an overarching body like a design ops that takes care of processes and tooling and helps to design community to organize themselves? So a follow-up question of that, or like an adjacent question to that, for me is also oftentimes like, how does design work together with other functions? And this for me is a really important question, because I want to find out if design is like a partner to other functions. So are engineers and product teams equal to me as a designer? Do we do the work together? Or is design more like seen as a service provider to other functions, which happens more than you would wish, that design is still seen as a bit of an afterthought. And so a lot of the decisions have already been made before you as a designer are involved in the work. And so for me, it's very important to figure out how design works together, how that collaboration looks like, at what stages we already start working together. And what is a bit related to that is the design maturity within the company. Now, if you ask this question as directly as it stands here on the slide, I'm not sure if you will get an honest answer. So what you want to do is listen for hints on this. So again, how does design work together with other functions? How big is the design community? What are the expectations of designers? How big is your scope? Are you responsible for everything? How would that look like? Are you responsible for a smaller part? And how would that look like? How is design represented by management? I think that's also an important question, because that kind of gives you insight in the design maturity within the company. If there is no design role represented by higher management, that kind of tells you how the company looks at design. And so that indirectly also tells you a bit about how you as a designer will be treated. So, and that is also my last question. How is design represented by management? Do we have a head of design, for example? Is there someone that is on these very high levels that can vouch for designers? These are questions that throughout my career, I found that they are actually really important for me personally. You might have other questions that you would want to focus on. So I would really recommend you take some time to think about, how would I like to contribute within a company? What would I like to take from them? How would I like to learn, and focus on that? So, for example, when I was looking for my first UX job, it was very important for me to be surrounded by other designers. I did not want to be the only designer, because I wanted to learn from other people. And so the things I focused on then was very much focused on mentorship. How much time would senior designers have for me? How would I learn? How can we guarantee my career growth? How would that look like? What are my responsibilities as a junior designer? So really take your time here to figure out what these questions are, and don't be afraid to ask the hard questions and to ask the difficult questions, because you also want to make sure that you land somewhere where you feel comfortable and that you like. And this is something that I have neglected in the past, because I was so focused on just getting a job that I wouldn't really think about, okay, this is a job that also needs to make me happy. So now I pay way more attention to that, to make sure that I don't just focus on getting a job, but getting a job that I actually enjoy going to. So some do's and don'ts in this interview phase, so when you're talking with the design team, is to ask questions, like I already said. So really don't hold back. Ask questions about the culture, the collaboration, the ways of working, growth opportunities, projects. Share also your thoughts on process and goals. Don't be afraid to share your opinion on things, because that also allows the company or the people that are interviewing you to see if they could find projects that fit your profile, or figure out in what team you could fit. So what has happened in the past is that I would interview for one role, and then later on they would get back to me and say, well, based on what you told us, we think this other role might be a better fit. So also share what is important to you. That makes the matchmaking way easier. And try to think about, the role description that you have. So also tie in previous experience that you have, tie in side projects that you have, community work. This is something that is really maybe underrated, but I found that in job interviews, people were always very interested in what I was doing next to my work. So the newsletter I'm writing or the Instagram page I have, these are things that stand out because it's not something that everyone does. So if you have a side project that you're very enthusiastic about, tell them about it. If you do community work that you feel really passionate about, tell them about it. And then in don'ts, this sounds very obvious, but don't be passive or uninterested. And I've been on the other side of the table. I've also done hiring interviews, and it's shocking to see the amount of people that come to an interview and have a completely uninterested attitude. And this to me is just an immediate no, because why would I continue wanting to talk to you if you're obviously not interested? So really try to show your enthusiasm, even if it feels a little bit overdone. Like, show that you're interested, give them some energy, and really try to see this interview as a two-way conversation. So don't just see this as an interrogation where people are firing questions at you that you need to answer in the right way, because there is not really a right way. Really just talk about it as if you're talking with friends. Try to see it that way. And now what you also don't want to do is forget the perspective of who you're talking to. So when you're having these design interviews, try to understand who is the customer of this company, and try to build some empathy for them, and try to look at it from their perspective, and offer build your story around that customer. So to already go into the interviews with some customer centric perspective is, I think, really helpful, because it already shows the company that you've thought a little bit about the challenges they're working with, and it shows them how you already thought about certain solutions. So after the phone call and the design interview, you get invited to some kind of challenge if you're still in the rounds. Now, this is a quite controversial topic because people feel very strongly about this. Either they think it's necessary, or they think it's completely nonsense and we should not take any challenges. I do not really have a strong opinion on it. I can dive a little bit deeper into this in a bit, but I just want to take some time here to talk you through what this challenge exactly entails. So these challenges can be home assignments where you are given a certain amount of time to work on something at home in your own time and in your own environment. You can also be invited to do some kind of whiteboard challenge, so some kind of interactive challenge through a Zoom call or in person, where it's a bit more on the spot, and therefore it needs a different kind of preparation than when you would have a home assignment. Either way, whether you take a home assignment or a whiteboard challenge, these challenges are not there to show off what great outcomes you can produce. They're there to understand how you work, and especially how you work together with the team. So I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they look at these assignments. They assume that you need to produce the most fancy UI or the most complex user journeys. And especially when it comes to the home assignment, it's very tempting to spend more time than is actually given to you. So say this is an example of a home assignment I had in 2019, where I had a take-home assignment that took 8 hours. I really timed this and made sure it's only 8 hours. Why? Because this time limitation is also important for hiring people to see, what do you arrive at 8 hours? What do you do with that time management? What are the things that you prioritize? So spending 24 hours or 12 hours on an assignment that should only take 8 hours is not really going to be of benefit for you. This was a take-home assignment for a design studio that I wanted to join, and they gave this project where I had to come up with a digital solution to stop smoking. What I focused on in these 8 hours is more an establishing a process. So in the end, I did not have a well built out app or a website on that could help people to stop smoking, but I more thought about what would be the steps that I would undertake when I would build a digital solution like that. And throughout these steps, I wrote down my thoughts on it. So what I did here is I did some user interviews with people around me that are smokers and that wanted to stop smoking. And I did that very rudimentary because you can already spend 8 hours on just user interviews. So I just, casually chatted with some people and mapped that. And then talked about why I did that. And that was to build some insights and build some understanding of this situation, of what is important for people that want to stop smoking. Then I did some paper ideation, and instead of showing every single sketch I made, I rather explained why I'm taking this step and what I hope to learn and what these sketches did for me. And then in the end, I presented some concepts. And as you can see, I just used an iOS template to fill out some push notifications. And I explained why I thought push notifications would be interesting to have in an app that helps you stop smoking. I created a grayscale home dashboard. It's nothing fancy, did not look beautiful. It's more about the why and the thought behind that. And I think that's something that I would recommend you do if you take a home assignment, to really focus more on explaining why you're doing something rather than investing all that time in coming up with the flashiest UI, because that does not tell the people as much about your thought process as just sketches and, talking them through your process. Then you also have things that are called whiteboard challenges, and these can be different kind of things. When I interviewed for my previous job, this whiteboard challenge was a 90-minute collaborative session during the interview. So this was live. I did not have time to prepare. I did not know what the whiteboard challenge would be up until I had the interview. And this was a whiteboard challenge that existed out of two different parts. One was to improve the checkout process by designing a new add to cart flow. That made sense because I was applying for an e-commerce company. And the second part of the challenge was to brainstorm on an improved information architecture of the landing page in case they would offer a new product category. So these whiteboard challenges, they were related to what the company was doing, but they were not actual problems that the company was facing. What is tricky with these whiteboarding challenges is that oftentimes you don't know what's coming. You just know that you will have an interactive session. That also means that the expectation is not for you to come up with the best outcome. Like, no one is expecting you to come up with the ideal UX in 90 minutes. That's also not how the reality of working as a designer looks like. So what's way more important in challenges like this is to talk the people through, again, your thought process. What would you do if you had to improve the checkout process? Where would you start? Would you do some competitor analysis? Would you do some research? What are the next steps that you would take? And what I made sure to do during these challenges is to engage the interviewers. So ask them questions, ask them what they think, really see them as collaborative partners. This is not some kind of performance that you have to do for them, but this is more something that you're taking on together, an exercise that you're taking on together. And so it's also a good opportunity for you to show how you work collaboratively. So I think this is why these challenges are oftentimes misinterpreted, because the focus tends, people tend to assume the focus lies on producing the best possible outcome, whereas the focus really lies on showing people how you think and making them part of that thought process. So these challenges, as I said, are quite controversial. The reason for that is that a lot of people say that it goes in the direction of unpaid work. It makes the hiring process unnecessarily long. It's very unsustainable if you are doing multiple job interviews, and you need to do multiple take-home challenges and whiteboard challenges. Then it quickly becomes a full-time job to look for a job. I've been in that place as well. And the people that refuse to take on challenges oftentimes use the argument that we should give a signal to recruiters that these are not reasonable practices, and therefore we should not partake in them. Other people might say, that's just how this game is played. That is just how the industry operates. You might also not feel like you have a choice, especially on a job market that's very competitive. If you say, I don't want to do a challenge, well, there are 50 other people in your place that would do a challenge. So you might also not have the luxury of saying no. And the benefit that I see in taking these challenges is that it is a chance to show your thought process. So my personal view on these challenges is that it really depends. Of course, I would prefer that we would not have them, because they are very unnatural in the way that designers actually work. The actual design work takes way more time than just 90 minutes or just 8 hours. It's way more collaborative than you doing a challenge just by yourself at home or just with one other interviewer. And what they do best is show the people that are interviewing you how you present under pressure. They don't really tell much about your design skills as such. So for me, if I take these challenges, it really depends. It depends on how high my chances are of securing the job. So if I get a challenge pretty late on in the job interviews and I already made it through several rounds, I could tell that my chances are getting higher and higher because I'm getting further and further in the process. So then I might be more tempted to take a challenge than when I'm doing a job interview and the second round is already a challenge and I don't even know anything about how they work, what the company exactly is. I might choose to not do this because it would just take up too much time and I don't even know what I'm committing to. Then it also depends to me on how important this job is to me. If I really, really want to work at this company, I'm very willing to go through multiple rounds of interviews and challenges because I'm very eager to work there. One of the other things I take into account is how long will this assignment take? If it's up to 8 hours, I would consider it. But if it's like more than 8 hours and it requires a lot of preparation, I'm not sure if I would take the challenge. It really depends on if I have other job interviews at the time, how far I've progressed with these interviews, how I count my chances there. And then also, is it a chance for me to convince? Do I feel like this is a challenge where I can play into my strengths? To give an example, I interviewed for a company last year before moving to Amsterdam, and I got to the third round, which was the challenge round. They sent the challenge to me, and it took me 5 times to read through the challenge, and I still did not understand what they wanted from me. I had my friends read through this challenge. They also did not understand it. So I did not feel confident that me doing this assignment would convince them that I'm a good candidate. And while I already had other job interviews running at the time, I decided to not continue with this challenge because it would just take away time for something where I felt like I'm not really going to be able to convince them anyway in this round. So, yeah, if you take these challenges, yes or no, really depends on your own point of view. I can understand all the kind of arguments. I do think that to immediately reject them is a position of privilege and luxury. If you can afford that, that's great. But I think for many people, and also for me at the time, I just did not have the luxury to say, well, I don't want to take any challenges because I had to find a job. So sometimes these choices are also made for you. So, what are things that you want to watch out for at this take-home assignment stage or at this whiteboarding stage? If an assignment takes days to finish, that's a red flag. It should be manageable. It should not be a second job. If it solves an actual company problem, that could also mean that they just want you to give some input on some challenge that they're actually already working on. And that should not be the case. This should be an assignment of your skill. This should not be free work. And then lastly, if this assignment has no relation at all to your job description, that might also make you wonder, is this something that is worth it for me to do? What will they take from that? To give another example with that, I also once interviewed for a company, and before I even had the screen call, I had to take one assignment, which was kind of like a logical assignment where I had to solve mathematic problems. I'm really bad at math, for example, to start with, but also I did not see any relation to the design role. So for me, that was an immediate no, I'm not going to continue with that because I just don't see the point of that. Okay. Then when you're doing these challenges, you might feel very anxious and very nervous, and that's totally normal. I also feel that way. So what can you do to manage your stress level while you're doing these interviews or while you're doing these assignments? What the key is that you want to focus on process over these pixel perfect designs. So you want to focus on sharing your process. You want to focus on thinking out loud. So even when you feel stuck somewhere, just say that. Say, I'm not so sure how I would go about this. These are the things I'm considering. Collaborate with the team. Ask for their input. Ball with them. Ask how they would do things, and like kind of test your ideas with them. And then also explain your decision making. What you don't want to do is spend more time than allocated. As said, that kind of takes away the whole purpose of this assignment. You don't want to lose yourself in perfecting the outcomes, because it's not about the outcome, it's about the process. And what you also don't want to do, and this is especially relevant when you have a home assignment, is don't just share the good stuff. In fact, share most of the ugly stuff, because that's where all the decision making happens, and that's where the actual interesting stuff happens. All right, that was quite a long talk about challenges, but when you finally made it through the challenge, you are basically in. I'm not sure if I should say it, if I should say that to set the wrong expectations, but I found that in previous job interviews, whenever I made it to the challenge, I would start to feel pretty confident in getting an offer, because I knew that the next interviews would be more like culture fit, and a lot of things would more be like refining, seeing if it really is the right match. But there is already most of the competition at this point is behind you, let's say it like that. So after this challenge, it might happen, it's not always the case, but it might happen that you have another interview, or maybe two kinds of interviews. Oftentimes, these are the cross-functional interviews where you get to know the other team members. So this can be an interview with engineering colleagues, product, marketing teams, or other roles that you will closely be working with. What you want to focus on here is, how do these people work together with design? What's the ways of working? How does collaboration look like? What kind of challenges are they facing? And how might you help them as a designer? Or how might you be affected by that as a designer? And what are the success stories of the teams? How do they like to work together? How have they been working together with designers up until now? So the reason why, for me, these interviews are very important is because it explains how I, as a designer, will have an impact in the company. So, for example, at Miro, I'm working in cross-functional teams, meaning that I'm the only designer in my team, and I work closely together with engineers, product managers, and marketing managers. So my day-to-day collaboration partners are not other designers, they are other engineers, they are my product manager, and therefore this interview is actually really important for me, because I'm talking with the people that I'm going to be talking with on a daily basis. That was very different compared to my first job at a design studio, where we didn't even have developers at the studio. I only worked together with designers. Everyone in this studio was either a designer or a project manager. So I collaborated very closely together with other designers, UX designers, UI designers, and I had very little direct contact with developers. So again, in that particular job interview, I did not have cross-functional interviews simply because there were no other functions. But as you move into bigger companies, you will find that these interviews happen more often, because it's more likely for you to work together with these people. And then lastly, if you made it through everything, you get to the offer negotiation stage. And here you can already see the finish line, but it's just like the one last hurdle that you need to take. And now you can already taste the victory, but you're not just there yet. And I think this is a stage to not lose your focus, because a lot of things can still happen here. What you want to do, and this might feel a bit counterintuitive, because you might feel like you don't want to play open card with people during the hiring process. But what I found has always benefited me is to be very open about my timeline. So if I was interviewing with different companies and they were progressing at different rates, I would just be open about that. To give you an example, while I was interviewing with Miro, I was already in interviews with other companies as well, and I was actually way further with these other companies. However, I really, really wanted to work at Miro. And so from the get-go, I already told them, listen, I'm in interviews with other companies. They're moving at a faster pace. I'm very eager to work at Miro, however. So is there any way to speed up the process? Is there any way you can already give me some outcome by a certain date? Because what you want to avoid is waiting too long and not having any offer in the end because they all rejected you. So you don't want that. So be open about your timeline. If you feel like, hey, this is a company I feel really strongly about, I would really like to work here, but the pace is just not high enough, or I need an answer before a certain date, just say that. Ask for work benefits. Like your compensation is important, but there are many more things that make up why a company is a better fit than another company. For example, maybe they pay for your public transportation. Maybe they have a really good retirement plan. Maybe they have family benefits that could be of good benefit for you. So always take a look at these as well. Don't just push them aside and think they're not important, because they actually can make up a good portion of, like your overall compensation. If you don't feel happy with the amount that they offer you as a compensation, say that. Don't be afraid that in this very last stage they will be like, okay, whatever. If they get so far with you, that means that they really want to work together with you. So there is some leeway. If you don't feel comfortable, renegotiate. If they cannot match your compensation, maybe there are other benefits that they can offer you. And always read the contract proposal, read the tiny letters. Even if it's boring, really take some time to read through everything, ask questions if you don't understand what's in the contract, and make sure that you know what you're signing to. What you should not do, don't feel obliged to accept an offer. Maybe you get into this very luxurious position where you have multiple offers. Feel like, follow your intuition here, follow your gut here. Don't feel like pressured to accept an offer because it got there earlier, or maybe they pressure you into signing. Really just like follow your intuition here. So I'm also saying here, like, don't ignore your gut. That's something that I've done in the past and I've always paid the price for it, so don't do that. Don't just assume that the contract is fine and not read it. Always read it. And don't assume that a deal is done before you signed it. It has happened. I've heard about it. Luckily, it didn't happen to me, but I've heard about it that, people have gotten to the offer stage. They thought everything was good. And then at the very last minute, the company decides to not continue. So really, wait until the moment until you signed. That is definitive. Okay, bonus tips. We've made it pretty far. I've talked a lot. I'm gonna rush, so we have some time for questions. Bonus tips. These things sound obvious. They do make all the difference, though. Impress your interviewer. Show enthusiasm. Show energy when you're showing up somewhere, even when it's a Zoom call. Dress the part. I know this sounds like such like boomer advice, but this really makes the difference. Like, dress like you're going to win this. You're not going to win things in your sweatpants. Make small talk, connect with people. Like, find moments during the job interviews to also get that human connection. Be proactive, ask questions, share your thoughts, offer alternatives, show that you're interested. Again, going back to this dating analogy, when you're just sitting in this interview and people are talking and you're just like, well, I don't have any questions for you. You always have questions. Think of some before you have the interview. Then also remember, this is a two-way street. You can set boundaries. You can tell hiring people when they are crossing a boundary. I've had job interviews where people showed up late or they don't show up at all. And this has happened with me with a company where first they showed up late the first time. The second time they had to reschedule last minute. And then the third time they didn't show up. So I canceled this interview because that already tells you how these people work. So set boundaries. If people are rude to you during a job interview, you don't need to accept that. If you need to move faster, say it. See interviewing as a practice. So even if you're interviewing and you're not getting further or you're not getting to the offer stage, try to see this as practice. Write down the questions they ask so that you know how to come prepared for the next time. Do your research on Glassdoor. Write people on LinkedIn that are working on the company. Ask them how they like working there. Ask them questions. Build some some relationship with them, and really do the preparation work you need to do to feel confident. Here I have some examples that I already told about before, so I'm just going to go through them quickly. I had multiple instances where I had multiple applications running at the same time. So what I did there is I explained time pressure, that I felt this time pressure. I agreed on the timelines. I was being transparent up front about not who I was interviewing with, but that I was in different interviews and what that meant for me. I was also being transparent about my preferences. Some people might say, don't do that, but I believe in transparency and honesty. It has always worked well for me. Then set boundaries. If interviewers come too late, don't show up multiple times, don't continue with them. I had an interview where the first thing that people said was, you're not the person we're looking for. So that interview, as you can imagine, did not go well because they were not looking for a profile like mine. So I also cut that short because why spend time on that? Set boundaries when, and this has also happened to me, I'm being scrutinized by a company because I chose to accept another job offer, also something that you don't need to accept. So as you go through job interviews, you will have multiple instances that are just weird situations, and don't feel like you have to put up with that. Okay. I'm sure William has picked some very spicy, challenging questions, so I'm not sure how much time we have to go over this. I do have some time, but yeah, that was a very long talk, so I'll let you talk now, William.
I love the emphasis on spicy. I just want to go back to slide 27. Being scrutinized for choosing another job offer?
Yeah, that was weird.
You experienced that?
Yeah, I was interviewing for 2 companies and I accepted a job offer for one company. And so when the other company called me, I said, well, I actually already accepted another job offer. And then I got called out by the manager that I'm not, that I don't have respect as a designer for choosing to work at a big corporate, and that I will be back next year begging for a position. And now the absolute banger is that this design studio was gone within a year. So I guess I dodged a bullet there. That was really weird.
Oh, it's terrible. I also have one experience, so I'm not going to mention any names or stuff, but when you get a task package to do, I did a task package, and then the company used all those tasks in their future social media. So all the stuff that I worked on, suggestions were then integrated feature on. But anyway, let's move on and let's focus on the audience. There's a great question coming on YouTube. What advice can you give to entry-level designers, and what is the best strategy when applying for jobs?
The best advice, and also for entry level, is really do your research on the company. Like really show already in the cover letter, but definitely during the interviews, that you know what this company is about. Read up on the company, try to understand what are they working on, who are their competitors, what differentiates them, what kind of value do they bring. Try the product out if you're interviewing for a company that creates products. So to really show that you're very interested in them, I think that's the key.
I think that's great advice. Also, if they've recently had a new launch or a new rebranding or something, to like mention that. I think that's a great tip there. There's a great question also on Big Marker from Christina. If you're interviewing for an internship position, would you encounter a take-home assignment or whiteboard challenge?
I find that hard to answer because I never interviewed for internships, but I would use the same approach as I've shown in the presentation. So make that decision for yourself. If that's an internship where you see a lot of opportunity to grow, if that's an internship that you're really eager to do, if the assignment that they give you is reasonable, then I might consider taking it. But it really depends on like what kind of internship is this and what are they asking from the assignment.
Do you think some companies ask too much from interns?
I have never worked with interns, so I find that hard to say. I've worked with like students that were working students in the design studio, and they basically did the same as we did. So you might say that they have very high expectations. Having said that, when these working students were done with their studies and graduating, they also immediately got a job at that design studio I was working at. So I guess they just like fluidly went from working student into an actual employed designer. So might have been worth it, I guess.
There's also a great question from Tetiana, and I feel that this really fits the bill for anybody applying for a new job. How do you deal with the nerves before or during any of the stages of the interview process? For Tetiana, she feels like it's getting in the way all the time, the nerves.
I think it's normal to feel nervous in a certain way, and I also think if you really feel like you're so nervous that it's stopping you from having a good conversation with the people, just tell them in the beginning, like, hey, I'm really nervous about this conversation, so that they also know where your mind is at. And I think it's totally fine to admit that you're nervous. It's completely normal. And it also never completely goes away. I'm also still nervous when I'm interviewing for jobs. So the best way for me to deal with it is to, like I said before, research the company before, already think about some questions that I would like to ask, think about what is important to me, what are the things that I really want to find out. And be transparent about where your mind is at in the beginning. Break the ice with some small talk, and don't feel like you need to perform in a certain way, because most of it is really about, are we as humans, like, do we have a good connection? Do you bring the necessary skills? And if it's not a good match personality or like culture fit wise, as they say, then it's not a good match, and that's fine as well. So don't feel like you really need to perform or be someone else than you are, I guess.
Do you think for design roles with the nerves, it helps when you have a portfolio in front of you and you have something to present as opposed to just going into an interview completely cold?
I think, oftentimes they will tell you what they want to see, and that also already really helps. So maybe that's also a good thing to mention. If you're nervous and you want to know how to prepare, ask them. If you're invited for the next round, ask them, what can I expect? A lot of companies have whole blog articles, interviews, tips on what they will ask. So you will have a lot of resources on that online also. But just ask them, what's the best way for me to prepare? And sometimes they want to see a portfolio, and then you can prepare that. But sometimes they also just want to see some rough materials, and then I just talk them through it and not really build a storyline.
Another great question on Big Marker from, and sorry if I pronounce anyone's names wrong, Ika, I think. Hi, Maureen. What are the benefits of asking for compensation information on the screening call if this is for your first UX design job? As a junior, I don't have much preference on salary range, but I do have an idea of what's an amount that will support my everyday life. I'm just worried that I might come across as someone who's all about money as a junior.
First of all, I don't think you have to worry about coming across as someone who's all about money, because the reason we're working is to earn money. So that is totally fine. And I think it's also quite expected or acceptable to have these conversations early on. And the reason why you want to have these conversations early on is because even when you say, I'm a junior, I don't have any expectations, you do have living expenses. You do have a certain amount of money that you need each month in order to survive. So you want to find out as soon as possible if the compensation that you're going to receive will cover your costs, will enable you to live. And therefore, I like to have these conversations early on, because it already happened that I had conversations, and only after a few calls I found out that the salary is so low that it would not make sense for me to continue these conversations. And therefore I always choose to have these questions early on, even when it feels uncomfortable. But I don't think you should worry about coming across as a money obsessed person, because you're interviewing for a job. So of course it's about earning money.
I think it's great advice there, because I mean, you're not doing the company a favor per se. You are there to earn a wage, but also bring value to the company. So you think it shows confidence then to answer like that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, like, of course, you also want to show the company that you are interested beyond just their salary. That's also the reason why you're interviewing for certain companies. But I think the fear of talking about money should not stand in the way of talking about money, because it is an important topic. And the longer you wait with discussing it, the harder it's going to be. Because what if you had your 7 interviews and then you find out, oh, this compensation does not fit me? Then you've spent so much time, and then it's even harder.
For sure. And also with the jobs that or the experience that you've had since graduating from the CareerFoundry UX design program, and this is answering a question that's come in on LinkedIn, what's your experience of timelines for the processes in the jobs that you've applied for?
It takes always longer than I wish it would take, especially in recent years. So to give an example, my very first job, that was a completely different job market. So I applied through LinkedIn. I had one interview. The next day, I'm signing my contract. That has never happened ever since. I don't think that will ever happen again. So to compare that with the last hiring process that I was in, which was for Miro, I sent my application, I think, in December of 2022. I had my first call end of January. So that's already like 2 months in between. And then I signed the contract somewhere in March. So we're really talking a timeline of like 3 to 4 months. So that is quite long. But when I interviewed for Zalando, it was also between a month and 2 months. So I think this process will rather take months than it will take weeks. It also depends on how big the company is, I think.
Does it also change on position? Is the process faster for junior roles as opposed to more senior roles?
I found that the difference is more depending on the company, although that is also not entirely true, because the interview process with Zalando was way shorter than it was for Miro, even though Zalando is way bigger than Miro. So I cannot really say that there is a relationship between junior and senior roles. I cannot really say that there is a relationship between how big the company is. I feel like design studios move faster than in-house role, like processes for in-house roles. That's my experience, at least.
Sure. I'm going to take a couple more questions. I am mindful of the time. I do know that we've got a lot of people watching tonight who are considering a career change into design. Either they're transitioning from a different career, a completely different background, or they're just starting out in design. A great question that's coming on YouTube is, what is the most important to recruiters when selecting junior designers? So those that are just entering the industry.
What I found when I was interviewing, and then those were roles for juniors, is that the most important thing is this person motivated? Are they willing to take initiative? Are they willing to learn? Are they willing to change their mind about things? Because you can learn any kind, like you can learn someone how to use Figma. That's not, or you can learn someone how to do user interviews. Those are all just hard skills that you can teach. But what is very hard to learn is someone that's passive and doesn't take initiative, or someone that is not willing to figure things out on their own and come up with opinions and ideas. So I think the most important thing for juniors is, are they willing to learn? Are they motivated? Are they willing to participate in things? Or are they, just like, do you need, how do you say that? Yeah, I think what I said was really my point. Like, are they willing to learn?
Awesome. And then linking to that, Maria on Big Market has selected Miro, but we won't dig into Miro as a company. But in your opinion, what sets apart a successful candidate in the interview process for a product design role in general?
I think it's two parts. One part is just your skills and experience. Do you fill in the knowledge that this company is looking for? So to come back to my last two jobs, these were roles where they were looking for someone that also has some service design experience. So do you fit the boxes of the actual skills and knowledge that they're looking for? These are things that are a bit easier for you to control, because you either have these skills or you don't have these skills, but you can learn them. And then the second part is a bit more difficult, because it's about, how do you as a person fit into the team, but also how does this company fit for you? And that's more about, like, what kind of soft skills do you bring? How is this team already built up, and what kind of person are they looking for to complement? And that's very hard to prepare for, because you just don't know until you start the interview, like, exactly how you would fit into that company. And that's why I stressed so much on ask these questions, these deeper digging questions, because they will tell you what kind of people they're looking for, and that will give you an idea of, are you that person or not? And sometimes you're not that person, and that's also totally fine, because you don't want to work at a company that has, where you feel like an alien. I've had that before, where I took a job and then I found out culture wise it's just not a fit at all, and it's also not nice for you. Then it's not nice for any of the parties.
Great advice. Maureen, thank you so much for presenting this evening. For anyone who's enjoyed Maureen's presentation, I would also recommend checking out Maureen's Instagram account. So that's UX Collection. I'm posting a link here in Big Market. Check out Maureen's content, all about product design, career change, UX design, some great tips over there. Also, for anybody watching on YouTube, check out UX Collection over on Instagram. For anybody who's interested in taking a career change program, just like Maureen, we are currently offering a 20% off our UX design program with Maureen's discount link, which I've added on Big Market in the little sticky note and it should also be somewhere on YouTube and LinkedIn too. We've also got discounts on our other design programs too. So CareerFoundry offer a UX design program, a UI design program, and a product design program, which are all AI enhanced, thanks to our curriculum editors. So if you'd like to find out about that, I am also posting a link to a book call with one of CareerFoundry's program advisors, specifically if you want to talk about the curriculum, the dual mentorship model, because every student gets paired with a mentor and a tutor. And we also offer a job guarantee too. So if you don't land a job within 180 days after completing a CareerFoundry program, we do refund your tuition in full. So I would recommend checking that out. Also, check out the CareerFoundry events page. We've got a great lineup of speakers coming up through March. We're just moving out of February, but in March, and the CareerFoundry blog too for some articles on career change, hiring process, but also more specifically about some of the programs that we do offer. Thank you everybody for all your fantastic questions over on LinkedIn, YouTube, Big Marker. Sorry we didn't get around to answering them all. There was some really great content and some great engagement too. And Maureen, thank you so much. It was a great presentation. I think we got some real insider insights this evening, and I also learned some stuff too. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And if people still have questions, they can always write to me on Instagram. I will try to answer all the questions. So yeah, looking forward to the next event, and I'll see you all then.
True, we've got one more event lined up here in March.
Mm-hmm.
And the topic is
it too late to become a UX designer?
Yes, that's happening in March. That's over on the CareerFoundry events page. Thanks, Maureen. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining this evening.